Part 3, the immigration consternation. Further arguments the liberals have with regard to immigration have to do with the idea of a wall. And they got, all of a sudden, after, for years, voting for a fence or a wall or a barrier, are now all of a sudden all against it. And they've come up with every kind of possible idea as to why a wall doesn't work. Their own wall that they wanted just, 12 years ago, all of a sudden, they don't want. Less than 12 years ago in some cases. This case of Hillary Clinton, it was 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Why a wall doesn't work. So liberal logic goes something like this. There's a couple of reasons. Nancy Pelosi, for instance, was recently talking about the waste of money that a wall would be. Now, what are we talking about money-wise? The wall is currently, they're looking to get $5 billion to do part of the wall. It wouldn't pay for all of it. Some estimates had the wall a few years ago at about 10 to 13 billion. But Trump's actually been talking about 25 billion. Oh yes, and the Mexicans would pay for it. By the way, he never said when they'd pay for it. He never said how they'd pay for it. Money's fungible. If we get more money by his NAFTA agreement with Canada and Mexico, and we end up getting more money with trade through our new NAFTA agreement with the Mexicans, and that somewhere in that we get $25 billion more over the course of some period of time, could it not then be said that Mexico paid for the wall if we simply say that fungible money paid for built the wall? We could. I'm not saying that's the way Trump meant it, but in effect, you could say that's Mexico paying for the wall. But again, he didn't say how, he didn't say when, and he didn't say how long it would take. So everyone who's complaining about the wall being built by American taxpayers still hasn't figured that one out. Total side note. More to the point, Pelosi and others saying the wall's too expensive, $25 billion. Oh, okay. So, how much do we spend on illegal immigration every year? It's a good question. Nobody knows for sure. But if you were to add in all the money the states alone spend on illegal immigrants, with regard to health care, with regard to education, with regard to drugs they bring in and the side effects of those, with regard to all the criminal behavior that they engage in, and the time in court, and the lawyers, and the this and the that, and the cost of deportation, and the cost of, putting them in prison when they commit crimes, and the cost of what the liberals spend on trying to confer those rights to them. Well, and then you add in the cost of all that for the federal government, on top of all the states that have to spend billions of dollars every year on them. And you would probably be well northward of $100 billion a year. Some estimates have it as around 113, 118, all the way up to $180 billion a year, just dealing total, federal and state, all the way down to municipal, to deal with illegal immigration. But $25 billion or $5 billion now, that's too much money. Liberal logic. Here's the problem. We spend that money every year. Build the wall, you spend it once. I'm going to return to that point after this. What does Pelosi say? Oh, what would be a better way of spending money? We should put more drones in the air and have more Border Patrol agents. That's where $5 billion should go, or what they're willing to give us, or give Trump, if you will, $1.8 billion, or whatever the number was. Drop in the bucket. Crumbs, you might say, to quote someone. Liberal logic. That doesn't work. You say, well, a lot of drones, and those are pretty cool, and a lot more people. I wasn't talking about having more people at the border. I mean, Trump wanted to have the National Guard or the military on the border. That's more people. Why wouldn't that work? Let's spell it out. The border is a little short of 2,000 miles long, total border. Do you know how many drones it would take to cover 2,000 miles of border? Where they could respond to a crossing of the border fast enough to reach that spot, and then be able to tell the people running the drones, be able to tell Border Patrol, who also have to be located. There has to be enough of them, of these agents, to be able to go to the spot the drone in the middle of the freaking desert said they're crossing the border, before they actually cross the border and disappear and get away. You know how many people that would take and how many drones that would take? How much does a drone cost? How many drones? We're talking hundreds of drones. Hundreds of people running the drones. Thousands of Border Patrol agents to be able to cover enough of the area. And they'd have to build places for them to separate themselves out, like guard posts along the border, so they wouldn't have to be traveling for 100 miles to a desolate spot where they're crossing the border before they're already gone and disappeared. That costs money. Lots of money. And you don't pay for that just once. You got to pay for those drones and their upkeep. If some cartel member or other illegal immigrant decides to shoot one of their drones down, you got to buy a new one. And all the people running the drones in the Air Force or whoever else is running it, and all the people getting payroll checks who work at the border security and any other agency that happens to be in charge, and the ICE agents down the road. All this is an annual expense. Doesn't pay. You don't do it one day. You keep doing it every single year. If it costs $5 billion a year, I'm just throwing that number out just for a specific reason. I have no idea what it costs. It's got to be in the billions. If all that costs $5 billion a year, it will cost $5 billion every single year into the future. And of course, as inflation goes, it'll cost more. What's the wall cost? $25 billion. If you spent $5 billion a year for 5 years, you'd never longer have to spend a cent. The upkeep of a wall would probably be minimal. You wouldn't need as many Border Patrol agents. You wouldn't need nearly as many drones or people running the drones. You wouldn't need any more than you probably have now, maybe even less. So the logic that says the wall is too expensive is wrong, and the logic that says spending money on drones and people instead of the wall is dead freaking wrong. No logic to it. Liberal logic. What else do they say? Well, if they build a 12-foot wall, then all the illegals have to do is bring a 13-foot ladder and your wall's useless. Again, liberal logic. First of all, no one's building 12-foot walls. What's proposed? The wall would be 35 to 40 feet, or maybe even as high as 50 feet in some areas. 1,000 miles of the nearly 2,000 miles would be wall because the remainder of it would have natural borders and barriers that couldn't be crossed anyway and would be easily defended without the need of a wall. So we're only talking about 1,000 miles of wall, 35 to 40 feet or higher. So let's take the liberal logic to its through that scenario of that type of wall. The wall, by the way, would also be buried deep, maybe even to bedrock. So there would be no tunneling underneath them. It would be a lot more difficult anyway. So if you had a 35-foot wall, you'd need a 36-foot ladder, according to the liberals' logic. Do you know how heavy a 36-foot ladder is? You know how long a 36-foot ladder is? They'd have to be one of those ladders that, extend. You know how heavy that is? You think your average woman and child crossing the border, because there's so many women and children, the liberals say, you think they'd be able to lift the damn thing for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of miles as they traverse as a caravan or otherwise through Mexico to the border? You think the coyotes are going to carry it for them? Hell no. The coyotes don't go anywhere near the border. They say, it's over there. Give me my money. You think the cartel members are going to carry a hundreds of pound ladder, hundreds of miles? Hell no. In desert heat? Hell no. Let's say they do. Let's say there's a whole bunch of them. Let's say they got a freaking truck and carry a ladder. Okay, they got a big, long ladder to cross a big, tall wall. What's on top of the wall? It's either this big round thing, which you can't really even straddle or sit on, or it's got spikes on it. The ones I've seen, the propositions of the wall that I've seen. How are you going to get over that? Okay, you put the ladder up, you climb up the ladder, and you're on top of the wall somehow. How do you get down? It's 35 feet. You break a leg. You smash your head. It's 40 feet. It could be 50 feet. How do you get down? Do you jump? Some people might jump 30 feet, survive it. What if they have women and children with them? You're going to toss your kid over a 35-foot fence? You're going to lower your wife down a 35-foot, 40-foot high fence? That's 4 stories, people. 4 stories. You're going to jump off a 4-story building? Not many people I know would do that. Oh, okay. Then we'll put the ladder on the other side and climb down. Really? You're on top of a wall you can't really straddle, and you're going to lift a couple 100-pound ladder up a 35 or 40-foot high fence and then put it on the other side? Just like that? Meanwhile, by the time you figure all this out, Border Patrol. Once again, liberal logic. Walls don't work. Another little thing that our friends on the left like to talk about. Walls don't work. The very walls, by the way, they themselves proposed. Now they don't work. Tell that to the people in Israel, the town of Shiloh, or whatever the name is, Shilal, whatever that is. The mayor of that town will tell you, oh, they work. They work really well. But we don't have to go national, or international, to describe how well walls work. Walls, by the way, which, because they don't work, are for some reason around the Obama's residence, Hillary's residence, Nancy Pelosi's residence, Maxine Waters' residence, Chuck Schumer's residence, and on and on and on. Because walls don't work. We can go national. We have walls on our border. They're small. They're not very long. But wherever there is a wall that had been built on our southern border, the percentage of illegal activity, illegal crossings, border crossings, dropped by no less than 95% and as much as 97 or 98%. You can look it up if you're not being lied to by some liberal on Google or Wikipedia or some frickin' thing. Where we have a wall at our southern border, at that location, illegal border crossings has dropped 95+%. Conclusion, walls work. They work here, they work there. They work everywhere. They even work at the homes of the liberals, who, by the way, also don't like guns but have bodyguards. More hypocrisy. So, the wall will work. Why don't they want the wall? Because Trump's proposing it now. And this is all about resistance and ideology. And we're just pawns in a game, us American citizens. A game we have no business even being part of. To conclude this part, before we go to part 4, I want to talk about some of the underpinnings, underlinings of this movement as well, to keep the borders open. As I mentioned in my book and some other videos, this invasion, which is really what it is coordinated. The Mexican government used to put out, maybe still does, pamphlets on how to successfully cross a border. Liberal lawyers are going across the border to teach illegal immigrants what to say once they reach the border, and to talk to American officials. They try to they ignore the issue with their sicknesses that they're bringing, including smallpox, across the border in the United States. They were complaining that Trump is, putting kids in cages, even though photographs and videos of kids in cages existed during Obama's administration. No one said boo about it. Of course, it just goes on and on. And none of this has anything to do with the real issue. One of those underlying issues started all the way back in the Bush administration, 43, HW. And that is a group called La Raza, which is Spanish for the race, was sitting at the table at the White House deciding on border and immigration policy with President Bush. Why is that significant? Because La Raza is a group of open border radicals who are from Mexico, I believe, but they're from here, but they're Mexicans, who believe in a concept called La Reconquista, the reconquering of the United States. In other words, they're pissed off still, or again, or whatever, that the United States absconded, if you will, with the Mexican territory of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, and they want it back. Having an open border lets them have it back, and they can't do it in a war. They know that. But if they flood America with Hispanics, it becomes a Hispanic country, and then they take it back. Didn't think about that one, did you? So, we will talk about the idea of amnesty next in part 4. Stay tuned.